Hello, welcome to the channel, Flesh to the Father. Today I'm going to do a quick, simple guide on how to understand the truth behind Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Jesus, his Christhood or his Messiahship. Is it true? Is it false? And to dispel a lot of the stupidity that a lot of these online people such as Candace Owens, Sneeko, Andrew Tate, who argue over these things, but they do not have a clue what they're talking about. In this video, I'm going to give a simple guide to clear things up. Okay, so firstly, we have to start from the very beginning. And the very beginning was Judaism. Judaism was the original Abrahamic religion. And from there, they were expecting a Messiah at some point to usher in a Messianic age. And to this day, the Jews are still waiting for what they believe will be their Messiah. And from there, Jesus Christ came along. And from there, the Christians accept Jesus as the prophesied Jewish Messiah. And this is where the dispute between the Jews and the Christians come, because the Jews say they reject Jesus as their Messiah. And the Christians say, no, Jesus was the prophesied Jewish Messiah. And this has led to a lot of anger and hatred through the generations between Christians and the Jews, because once the church was set up, there was a lot of hatred towards the Jews because of their accusing them of killing Jesus. But let's look into who's right, who's wrong, and what is the truth. Now, me personally, when I started studying Jesus Christ, I loved his spiritual wisdom, because I have no denomination. I love spiritual wisdom, and his teachings resonated with me. So I just assumed, oh yeah, he's a Messiah. But then one day I was wondering, why do the Jews reject Jesus as the Messiah? So I started to look online, and as you can see on here, this is what the Jews were expecting their Messiah to be. So as be a human, have a human birth, not a virgin birth. Teacher of God's law, a great political leader. Jesus was not a great political leader. Rule over humanity with kindness. He'll bring peace to the world and usher in an era of peace. So there's lots of things in these prophecies that Jesus Christ didn't actually fulfill. So from there I was thinking, actually, I can sort of understand why the Jews reject Jesus as their Messiah. And then I came to the realization that the Christians during Jesus' time also had the same opinion, because a lot of them were saying, hold on, there's still wars going on, something to do with the temple. I'm not abundantly clear on that, but I know that they had their doubts. And this is where the Apostle Paul came up with the idea. He claimed he had a revelation that Jesus couldn't fulfill it in his current time, but he would actually have a second coming. And in his second coming, he would fulfill the rest of the revelations. Now, for me personally, when I started looking at this picture, I could start to understand fully why the Jews have major doubts. And when I aligned my spiritual knowledge and wisdom and understanding, I came to the belief that the Jews were correct to reject him as their Messiah. But what Jesus was actually talking about was bringing spiritual wisdom into the world. So they're kind of both right in that Jesus was special, but it was his spiritual wisdom that he was teaching that was special. And maybe people confused that with him being the Messiah, when clearly he was not the Messiah, the Jewish Messiah. And the fact that the Apostle Paul had to come up with this idea that he had a revelation that he was going to fulfill it in his second coming, it's like when I hear a lot of conspiracy theories, when certain things don't happen, they just make up another conspiracy theory. And that what it seems like happened to me. He's like, hasn't worked out, so there's going to be a second coming. But that's not how it works. Either these things happen or they don't. And I actually think this is a problem, and this is why there's a lot of anonymity between the Christians and the Jews, and especially these new Christians and the ones who don't know what they're talking about, like Candace Owens, Sneeko, Andrew Tate, whether they're Christian, Muslim. They haven't put in lots of study and spiritual work to understand what they're talking about. They've just got this ego identity of now it's fashionable for the Muslims to hate the Jews, because that's basically part of Islam, is hating the Jews. So if they can just go, oh yeah, we love Christ is king, because it annoys the Jews. But what they need to do is stop being ignorant and actually look into these things, because that's one thing I learned. When you get out of an echo chamber and you genuinely listen to people, sometimes you say, hold on, they got a point. Sometimes I listen to them, like sometimes I listen to Muslims explain things and I still come out with the same opinion. They're talking nonsense. But sometimes you listen with an open heart and an open mind. You say, actually, they've got a point. And then you can start putting together the truth. And finally, just to touch on Islam, obviously Islam comes along in the 6th century. Prophet Muhammad comes along. And again, at the time, I thought Islam was a separate religion. But basically, what's happened is Prophet Muhammad had knowledge of Judaism and Christianity, and he was maybe thinking that he was a prophet or something to carry on the traditions, but he was rejected by the Jews and the Christians, which caused him to have a lot of hatred towards the Jews and the Christians because they rejected him. And he basically took Judaism and took everything from Judaism and parts of Christianity and just created his own version of Judaism. So Islam isn't a separate religion, as what I initially thought they were all just completely different. It's actually Judaism, just his version of it changed. In the same way that Ahmadiyya Muslims, they had a prophet who basically took Islam and just changed it and said, "Oh no, I'm the next prophet. There was no final prophet. I'm another prophet," something along those lines. That's basically what Prophet Muhammad did to Judaism. So a lot of the Muslims who hate Judaism, you do realize that you're kind of the same thing. You're just a slightly different version that Prophet Muhammad created. And the spirit of anger and hatred towards the Jews and the Christians that the Prophet Muhammad had, that spirit has carried on generations into Muslims. Today, that's why they have such anger and hatred at the Muslims and Christians, despite the fact that when they agree on certain points, they'll befriend the Jews or the Christians. So if the Muslims are arguing with the Christians about Christ's divinity, they don't believe that Christ is divine. So they align with the Jews and they'll go, "See, us and the Jews, we stand together against the Christians because we believe you're talking rubbish about Jesus." But when it comes about hating the Jews, then the Muslims can align with certain Christians who, for some reason, hate the Jews, mainly the Catholics. The Catholics, for some reason, seem to have a hatred of the Jews. I think from the lie that they're the synagogue of Satan, which was written by the Bible writers because obviously they had agenda against the Jews for rejecting Christ or rejecting Jesus, even though there is actually logic behind them rejecting Jesus, which unfortunately the Christians don't want to admit. They're just going along with their own conspiracy theories. So I hope that somewhat clears up how this whole thing from start to finish to where we're at now. And we basically, what's happened, we've had thousands of years of just arguing over ignorance. People don't understand what they're talking about. And the beauty of our modern age with the internet, we can all study and learn ourselves. And the more you study, it's like a giant puzzle. I've put together this giant puzzle and I can see where we're at and why we're a mess. And the Abrahamic religions, I think it started with a conspiracy about a Messiah. And then it's led to other conspiracies. Jesus came along and I believe he brought the truth, but it was turned into a conspiracy that he was claiming to be the Jewish Messiah. And then you've got more conspiracies about second comings, more conspiracies of Islam. Prophet Muhammad is just made up his own conspiracy. And the world is a mess. We just had decades and generations of wars over dogmatic beliefs, and rather than people being spiritually connected to the Father, as Jesus Christ actually taught when he told his story of the prodigal son. And to end the video, always I like to focus on the solution. The solution is actually what Jesus Christ taught about repenting, being born again spiritually, and returning to the Father. And it's not just Jesus Christ taught, it's spiritual wisdom that have been passed through the ages because it comes from the Father. The Father's spiritual wisdom has always been at work in this world. And it's in all other religious traditions, such as in Hinduism, Buddhism, they're touching on this truth. And it's all about when we're reborn spiritually, we overcome all the stupid dogma. We overcome the ego identities of being a Christian, a Muslim, a Jew. Once you're truly reborn as a spirit, which is a child of God, because our Father God is a spirit, we realize our ego identity of our flesh and of our mind, that's illusory. That's part of this 3D world that we currently inhabit in our physical body. But in the 5D spiritual realm, Jews, Muslims, Christians don't exist. So because when we all die and we go back to the spirit, we won't go back as Jews, Muslims, Christians. And for example, let's say that the Muslims are right. You're not going to go to heaven and there's going to be full of Muslims, because Muslims can't exist in heaven. Jews can't exist in heaven. Christians can't exist in heaven. Only the spirit that dwells within us exists in heaven. And we're all brothers and sisters in the spirit. And when we return to the spirit, we'll be united and we'll have world peace, or the Messianic age. And that's what the truth is. And that's what Christ was most likely teaching. And that, I have no doubts, is what our spiritual Father wants. And now that I'm reborn spiritually, I can see it clear as day. And I can also see how blind the world is. And as I say, the irony is the religious people don't have a clue. And I actually can see how Christ got frustrated, because Christ was trying to say, or I believe similar things, what I'm saying is what Christ was saying. And the world just didn't understand. They didn't understand. They were blinded by the ego. They were spiritually blind, and they couldn't understand the spiritual wisdom. Okay, so that's the point of my video. If you've got any comments, place them below. Like the video if you like it. Subscribe for more real spiritual wisdom, not shallow influencer spiritual, not even wisdom, just spiritual talk and chat. Okay, and God bless everyone for now. Goodbye.